Hey everyone, Phobos here, coming out with another demonstration, and this time it's not a build demonstration or a specific skill gem demonstration, but rather a general show-all skill demonstration. Basically decided to make this video as a way to help new players get familiarized with the skills coming into the new 3.0 expansion. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a three-part little video series here where I focus on the three main archetypes of skills as I would break them down in. The first one, which is this one, is going to be spellcasting skills. Then we're going to have one for bow skills, and finally we're going to have one for melee skills. Don't worry too much about the gem colors if you're a new player. They're not really super relevant in terms of like which archetype the skill falls in. Like you can have a green skill that's an attack skill, even though a lot of bow skills are green and stuff like that. So don't worry too much about the color type. I'm also going to annotate the video. I'm going to provide an annotation to skip this little introduction, and then I'm also going to provide one for each skill. So if you want to reference something or show somebody a specific skill, it'll all be time-stamped. So that should be nice and easy for you. I'm going to try and do like 10 seconds or less. I'm going to throw up sorry, not a spell or projectile, an area of effect skill or a projectile. Area skills can have their area modified, so you can make them bigger or you can make them smaller. And projectiles can have more projectiles. And so if you shoot like a fireball, for example, that has one projectile, you can put support gems on it to make it shoot multiple projectiles, or take stuff from the tree or use certain items that give it more projectiles. In some cases, you can even make things into like a nova of projectiles. And I'll try and go over those cases where they're pertinent. But yeah, I don't want to just repeat myself 100 times about, oh, you can add more projectiles to the skill or whatever, or you can add more area. So I'm just going to classify it as area or projectile. And then if there's anything specific about the skill that I should mention, I'll try to do that. So some skills will be a little bit longer than others, but we're going to try and keep it like 10 to 15 seconds max. And hopefully we'll get through a bunch of these fairly quickly. Some of the skills are going to be needed to be demonstrated on monsters. So I'll have to run up and tag a few mobs, but shouldn't be that hard. So yeah, I'm also gonna, the final thing before we get into the actual skills, I'm gonna break them down into tiers, and I'm going to announce the tier. I'm gonna go through like all the skills in tier 1, all the skills in tier 2, all the skills in tier 3. Now keep in mind, one caveat about this tier list is that it's not meant to be a tier list in terms of what is actually the most powerful skills in the game right now. That's the colloquial definition of a tier list, but this tier list is more just in terms of viability of the skill, right? So any skill in tier 1, you're going to be able to relatively easily make a build around it and be somewhat effective endgame, even if it's not like the most effective skill. And skills in tier 2 are going to be a little bit more difficult, but you should still be able to make some type of build around them. And then skills in tier 3, I would say for new players to avoid, just because it's very difficult making builds around them as a new player, and you kind of really have to know what you're doing to squeeze every bit of damage out. There's obviously probably going to be some disagreement within the community over which skills belong in each tier, but that's why I'm trying to keep it very generalized, and I'm not trying to do an actual balanced tier list because that would be a bit too complex, especially for newer players, because there's so many factors involved in terms of like clear speed in certain types of maps, the ability to do specific bosses, the ability to generally boss. So there's just a lot of different factors that would make it kind of very complex and overwhelm new players. So without any further ado, I guess we should jump into the list, and I'll start the timer now. It's an area skill, and it just shoots out an area like that. Now, the main thing about Glacial Cascade is that when you decrease the size, you get more hits because the skill hits multiple times. So if the area is smaller, it hits more times. If the area is larger, it covers more area, but it hits the same mob less times. Summon Raging Spirit, you just cast it like this, and it summons a bunch of little spirits that run out and melee things. They mostly scale with melee damage, so things like melee splash are good. And they do, I think, half fire, half physical damage, and they're transient summoned, which means that they don't persist, right? They eventually fade away. It's not like a zombie where you summon it and it stays up for all the time. Now this is Fire Nova Mine. It's a mine skill. You put a mine in the ground that you can see here, and then you hit the D button to detonate it, and it basically pulses 3 times and does fairly substantial amount of damage. Definitely a decent skill in the late game if you build around it. Mines are a bit unique, as this is obviously an area skill, but it can also be affected by multi-mine, which allows you to put down multiple mines and have multiple sets of explosions overlapping. Take this out. We'll do Righteous Fire. So this is going to be one that's going to be hard to see because I don't have much regen right now, but you basically turn this on, and it's going to put a degen aura on that you can see, and whenever you walk into something, it's going to damage them with a damage over time type of mechanic. So you basically just walk through monsters and kill them that way. Obviously, it's an area skill, so the area can be expanded, and you need some regen typically to make this skill sustainable, in addition to just having higher fire resistance. Right now this character is pretty much naked, so that's why the damage I took was so substantial. But Scorching Ray. So Scorching Ray is a beam that you shoot out, fire beam. It has 8 stages. At every stage it gets more fire penning resistance. I believe it's 3% for each stage. So 24% in total, and you can rotate the beam like this as you're casting it, but you have to remain stationary. When you have more cast speed, the beam rotates quicker, and this skill doesn't actually hit anything, it's just a burn, very similar to the Righteous Fire, so anything that hits, like fire penetration, will not affect it. Discharge, so for Discharge you actually have to get power charges, which is kind of a bit of a more complex mechanic, but we'll just use this to generate power charges for now. So we got some power charges, and then we hit our discharge skill, and you'll see it detonates. The idea is it's basically kind of like an AoE explosion, and typically builds involving discharge, you'll have some way of automatically getting power charges or some type of other charge, and then you'll be detonating yourself in the middle of packs and doing massive damage. It can obviously be scaled with AoE in terms of as an AoE multiplier. Firestorm, another great skill. So you just cast this skill, and it, based on the area you have, it casts a Firestorm over the area. Each individual hit does do damage, and that's very relevant when it comes to hitting mobs, because a mob's hitbox determines how much it's going to get hit by a Firestorm cast, basically, because each individual hit can, I believe each meteor is like 1 second or 0.1 second apart. Is what it is. Each impact is 0.1 second apart, and the smaller you make the Firestorm, the more clumped the explosions are, so you can hit a mob a lot more, especially if the mob has a large hitbox. But obviously a greater increased area of effect will make the Firestorm have a larger area, and this is one of the better leveling skills in the game, very commonly used leveling skill. Spark, basically a projectile. So you can add more of these, and it just shoots out projectiles like this. They have this interesting mechanic where they bounce off the wall, and when they bounce off the wall, they reactivate in terms of being able to deal damage. So they can deal damage on the way out, and then the same projectile that hit the wall can then hit the same target again, as long as there's a certain time frame that has passed, I believe, after it's hit the wall. So Spark is a very interesting skill. It's kind of good at killing things up against the wall or in an enclosed area. Fireball. So this just shoots out a projectile fireball. When this hits a target, it makes a very small explosion. This explosion, again, can be scaled by area, and there's specific threshold gems that make it so that the farther that the fireball travels, the larger the explosion area is. And obviously, you can add more projectiles to the skill, which increases the amount of fireballs you can throw out at once. Frostbolt, sort of similar to Fireball, except Frostbolt has a mechanic called Pierce, where you throw out the Frostbolt and it pierces the mob, which means it goes through that mob entirely until it ends its duration, and it can hit as many mobs as possible. Has full complete pierce. Some things only can pierce 1 or 2 targets, but in the case of Frostbolt, it goes through all targets it hits. As you can see, it gets a little bit. There's a threshold jewel that like makes it get faster as it goes out. I don't have that equipped right now, but and there's also jewels to make the amount of frostballs increase your number of projectiles and stuff like that. Yeah. Also chills and freezes targets depending on your damage level. Just fireball ignites targets. Freezing Pulse is another skill that does cold damage. shoots like one pulse out like this. Damage at the end of the pulse is less than damage at the start. This is unlike Frostbolt, where the damage of Frostbolt stays consistent the entire time until the projectile ends. Freeze Pulse, it tapers off towards the end. So you can scale Freeze Pulse with projectile speed as you can with a lot of other projectiles, but in the case of Freeze Pulse, it actually helps maintain the damage of the skill for a longer distance. You can also add more projectiles to Freeze Pulse, obviously, so you can have like 5 pulses or 3 pulses come out at once, and very good at freezing targets and a great leveling skill very early on in the game. We'll do Bladefall. So Bladefall, you cast it in an area, and knives come down. It's actually 5 sets of knives, but they just come down very quickly. So it kind of, you'll see it. It's like kind of like a rain there. Sort of similar to Firestorm, but when you cast a Firestorm, you can have multiple Firestorms out at once. You can actually overlap their damage. Whereas with Bladefall, you cast it once, and all the knives come down very, very quickly, whereas Firestorm, the duration lasts a lot longer. So the only time you're really going to be overlapping a ton of these is probably if you were to be using totems. Very strong physical skill, very great leveling skill, especially on totems. I'll take this out. Flameblast. So this is another great leveling skill commonly used on totems. You basically pick an area and it starts to channel, even though it's not technically considered a channeling skill. And then you'll get to a max area, and then you can let it explode, or you can just get to a certain amount of area and then let it explode anyway. You can see the stacks increasing. When it's at 10 stacks, that's its maximum stacks, and it's doing the most damage. This can obviously be, the area can be increased by area of effect or decreased. And yeah, pretty cool skill. Shockwave Totem. We'll actually save that for, we'll do Ethereal Knives next. So Ethereal Knives basically just throws knives out like this. These knives do not pierce. You can add support gems to make them pierce, but they don't pierce innately. A physical skill and can be converted to elemental through various means. It's a pretty strong skill, and there's also threshold jewels that exist for Ethereal Knives, where instead of just throwing it out in front of you, it actually goes out in a nova around you. So a lot of different things you can do with the skill. We'll do the Shockwave Totem now. So I'll put Shockwave Totem in, and we'll go find mobs. The thing about the totem skills is that in order for them to activate, in a lot of cases, you need to be next to a mob. So we'll find some mob in this zone right here. Actually went to the waypoint instead of right outside the coast. I thought there would be more mobs there, but okay. So you put the totem down, and it pulses, as you can see. And then it stays active for like 8 seconds, and it will continue to pulse during that time. And it's physical damage. You can convert it to elemental, though. It's a pretty strong skill, especially given that you can increase the area or decrease the area for more damage. So take this out, and Ice Trap. We'll do that later. Flame Totem is another one that we should look about. So Flame Totem is another totem skill. Keep in mind that most of these skills can function on a totem just fine, but you have to put them on a spell totem, whereas these are their own individual types of totems. When you put down the Flame Totem, it just spews a little flame stream that you can see, kills the mobs, just like that. As the totem gains more levels, it gains more projectiles, and you can augment the distance the flame is thrown by getting more projectile speed. So we'll take out Flame Totem here, and put Blade Vortex in. So Blade Vortex, you cast it and it puts a blade around you, and as you can see, as you keep casting it, you keep putting more and more blades, and then you basically run into mobs with the blades, and the more blades you have active, the more damage you're doing. So it's kind of a bit like a Cyclone skill, but it's actually a spell, and you're casting each individual instance of the blade, and then you're running into mobs and doing damage like so. Obviously, the range can be increased by AoE of with how far the blades come out from you. You can do Ice Trap. So Ice Trap, you put it on the ground, and then it explodes into a trap like that. It can be increased by area damage. You can also put like multiple traps on, which allows you to throw multiple of these at once, do overlapping damage, similar to mines. Not too much to be said about that. And I'm pretty sure we'll do Contagion and Essence Drain. So Essence Drain is a projectile you shoot out, and it does an initial hit and then a large dot component. So the main damage part of the skill is going to be the dot component, which allows it to function sort of like a totem skill in the sense that you don't need to be actively casting it to do the throw output damage all the time. So something like Freeze Pulse, to get the maximum damage out of it, you really need to be standing in front of the mob and permanently casting it. But with Essence Drain, you can cast it on the mob, move, and then cast it again when the dot has run out, and to basically re-trigger the dot. And you're not losing much damage because the initial hit doesn't do a ton of damage. And then Contagion is another spell. We'll demonstrate this here. It's basically like a plague that spreads. So I'll put this. Oops. We'll put this on these mobs. They'll take damage. They'll take damage. They die. It passes on to the next mob. And then, as you can see, sometimes Contagion and Essence Drain are used together, and you'll basically put Contagion out of pack, and then use Essence Drain to kill something, and that will help spread the dot quicker, basically. Can also obviously the radius can be increased by AoE. And that's pretty much it for tier 1 skills, and now we're going to be going into tier 2 skills. You could say there might be an argument to be made for Ice Trap being a tier 2 skill, but I put it in tier 1. And we'll start with Lightning Trap. This is another kind of borderline skill. It could be tier 1 or tier 2, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it's the easiest, or say that it's the easiest thing to make a build around. So we'll just find some monsters here, throw down a lightning trap, and it explodes with projectiles going out in each direction. You can augment the number of projectiles, obviously, as well as the number of traps with a bunch of different support gems. So there's that. Lightning Tendrils. So lightning tendrils, you basically stand still, similar to Flameblast, and you channel this little lightning that comes out of you. It's area of effect, so you can increase the area or decrease it, and it's like little multiple hits that kind of come in very fast. And yeah, so just like an AoE skill like that. Take this off, put in Arc. So Arc is very similar to Chain Lightning in I guess Diablo 2 or any ARPG game where there's Chain Lightning. As you can see, you cast it at one mob, it chains to the next mob. It's in tier 2 because just the damage on the skill overall is not really great for bossing, and it doesn't have the same clear speed as other skills because the amount of chains is still relatively weak, although it does do pretty decent damage to trash mobs. So just something to keep in mind. You can also increase the number of chains with support gems. Ball Lightning, another spell, you just cast a ball out, and these little sparks that come off the ball do damage to the mobs, basically. You can add more projectiles to have multiple balls. You can obviously increase the projectile speed to make them slower, faster, etc. If you have slower balls, the sparks that come out of them have more time to hit the same target, essentially, from what I gather. Arctic Breath, this is a skill where you shoot it. I'm just hitting a wall, but you shoot it out and it's like a little skull, and when it impacts the mob or the environment, you can see it makes like a little bit of an explosion there, and it leaves a trail of ice on the ground. You can obviously add more projectiles here, or you can increase the travel speed of the projectile or slow it for more damage. So a lot of things you can do there. Shock Nova. Shock Nova basically is just a Nova that comes around you, and depending on where mobs are in your proximity, where they hit on the Nova, they take more or less damage. They can get hit multiple times, I believe, in a certain part of the Shock Nova area. If you go in the wiki, I believe there's a nice graph that details it exactly. It's probably easier than me explaining it in this video. So decent skill, sort of similar to the Discharge, but basically I would say less viable endgame, although it can be built into a strong skill. I think that's pretty much the tier 2 skills. And I guess I'll do a Stormcall for tier 2 as well. So Stormcall puts these little markers on the ground that you can see right here. And the more cast speed you have, the more of these you can get down before the detonation. And you can also increase the duration of the detonation, or or increase the duration before the detonation, or make it so that it detonates quicker, as well as you can increase the actual area of these individual little AoE blasts themselves. So it's kind of a cool skill. Mostly just the targeting becomes annoying when you're trying to quickly clear through maps. So yeah, a little bit of a downside there, but still a cool skill in theory to play around with. And that's all the tier 2 skills. So right now we're going to be moving on to tier 3 skills. And Ice Nova we'll do first. So Ice Nova is just a Nova that comes out from your character, as you can see. And it can be scaled with area of effect, obviously. Freezes and chills things that it hits, freezes if it crits. It does reasonable damage, but it's just not quite enough damage, I would say. And obviously, as you can see, it has a mechanic where, with the Frostbolt, where if you cast a Frostbolt, so we'll do this, you cast a Frostbolt, you can then channel the Ice Nova off the Frostbolt. So that's an interesting mechanic, but it's kind of difficult to pull off in practice. So Searing Bond, we'll put this in here, throw down the totem, and it just kind of makes a line between you and the totem. And anything that's in this gets burned, takes burning damage, very similar to the Righteous Fire. It takes the damage over time. Not a terrible skill in theory. It was good at one point in the game, but the issue now is just like the clear on it is very difficult because it relies on you maneuvering yourself a lot to kill the monsters, and the damage on it is just not as good anymore as a lot of other skills. So that's why it's fallen out of favor. Magma Orb is an orb that you can throw, and it bounces basically, and you can do a lot of different things. You can change the amount of orbs thrown, you can make this chain, you can increase the explosion radius or decrease it, and you can change like the angle at which it's thrown at, as you can see. So you can do a lot of things with Magma Orb. Not really considered a great skill overall, although some people have made it work. Blight. It's kind of similar to Lightning Tendrils, but it's more the Chaos version. Can be increased with area of effect. And I definitely wouldn't recommend this for a starting skill, though. It's in a relatively weak position right now. Ice Spear might be possibly the worst skill in the game. Shoots the spear out, and this pierces the target once, then goes on, and when it pierces, it enters its second form, which has 600% increased crit. Increased crit is not the same as you're thinking in most games. What happens is in Path of Exile, each spell has a base crit, as you can see at 7%. So that 7% would be multiplied by the 600% increased crit, and that's how you get crit values in this game. It's not like you just have 6 times over the crit cap by having a 600% increased critical strike. So the problem with Ice Spear is mostly just the clear. You have to put multiple projectiles on it, which does decrease the damage quite substantially. And there's little explosion in the second form, if the second form hits something, I believe, but it's really just not enough to be a substantial damage skill, and it's very hard to build around. Incinerate, sort of similar to Scorching Ray in the sense that you stay in one spot and you pivot, and it gains stages, as you can see. It's at 3 stages now, 1, 2, 3. The higher the stage, the more damage, so there's a bit of ramp up time. And right now it's in kind of a weak place just because of the base damage is kind of low. You can obviously, it's a projectile, so you can add more projectiles or make the distance of the flames a bit further. Flame Surge, it's an AoE fire skill, which cannot ignite, but the caveat behind that is that it does 50% more damage, which is huge in PoE because more is a multiplicative multiplier, where increased is just additive. And so the more damage is really great, but it can't ignite things itself. It can only deal the more damage to things that are ignited. So you really need another mechanic to ignite things to make it good. And the radius, as you can see, is kind of weak. You can increase it, obviously, with more area of effect. Vortex, one of the last skills. It's kind of similar to Ice Nova. It puts down a a Nova on top of you, but then it does initial damage and then a dot damage component for anything that's still in a Nova. It basically chills and deals cold damage. So that's the difference, where Ice Nova's damage is all up front. This is up front plus a dot and a little bit less radius and less cast speed. And finally, we're going to do Detonate, Dead, and Desecrate. These aren't really in like a tier, I would say. I'm not really sure where they are, but they're kind of a bit of a unique mechanic. Detonate Dead basically explodes a corpse and deals a high amount of fire damage plus 6% of the mob's base HP. This makes it really good for dealing a lot of damage in kind of like a single cast or blow, because mobs can have a lot of HP, and you can affect the map mods as well to give mobs more HP. And Desecrate just makes a bunch of dead corpses and puts Desecrated ground, which is like a damage over time effect on the ground. So you can just detonate things that the Desecrate has picked up, as you can see, and that's basically how it functions. The reason why these skills are often together is because in some cases in a boss fight, you won't have corpses around to explode. So if you don't have Desecrate, you won't be able to do damage if you're trying to use this as a primary skill. So Desecrate gives you that bit of utility. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything for the casting skills. And yeah, like I said, I'm gonna annotate this. And any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll do my best to help you guys out. Obviously, only doing active skill gems here. Not really covering the supports, so that would take way too long. The video is kind of already long. But yeah, show this to your new friends if they're looking for a skill, and they can kind of peruse through, see what they might like. So thank you guys very much for watching, and hope you enjoyed the content, and see you guys next time.